So, having said this isn't an intro to BluOS, I should probably just point out. So BluOS is, in case anyone doesn't know, it's a software platform for streaming, manufactured by Lembrook, effectively NAD or NAD. Um, and it is important to point out it can be deployed in a bunch of different ways. So that's sort of quite key. It's a selling point, but it's also makes it slightly more complex because there are different ways of making an omelette or whatever the expression is. So Blue Sound, most people would be familiar with. It's your sort of high street multi-room setup. NAD custom install, exactly the same software platform, but it's designed to go in the rack. And then you've got BluOS in the NAD AV receivers. It's licensed for use by a bunch of different brands. It's in NAD's own two-channel products as well, and also Blue Sound Professional, which is more for large commercial, shopping malls and chain hotels and things like that. More sort of PoE and 100-volt line type stuff. But the important point is there are lots of different ways of deploying this. So the better that you know the range, the better equipped you will be to sort of propose the right thing to your customer. Now, if you're not sure, we are happy to talk to anyone about any projects you have or any questions that come from your customers to make sure you're specing the right thing, because we have come across people in the past where they've spec something and actually there could have been it works, it's fine, but there could have been a more cost effective or a better solution for their customer. So if you're unsure, happy to talk to you about any projects that you have. All right, so you're installing a BluOS setup. What should you do beforehand? So first of all, well, let me give you an example of what ideally not to do. So there's my least favorite installer that we've worked with in the past. I won't name any names, obviously, but on a couple of occasions, different products, actually not BluOS, but a couple of other products that we have. I think AudioFlow once and Rhythm on a different occasion. They've bought a product. They've not even looked at it. They've arrived on site and tried to plug it in, not even read the instructions, and then phoned me and said, or phoned someone here and said, "Oh, it doesn't work." You all know this. That's not good practice because yes, we will try and help you out, but it's better if you know something about what you're installing before you get to site. So, in an ideal scenario, you will basically mock up the install in the office or at home before you go there. Might not be worth doing every time, but certainly on the first one. In particular, if you're installing the network, you can do all of that and you can put the BluOS platform on the network and then you can take it and it'll be a quick and easy job. But that will probably alert you to most of the problems that you might encounter before you get on site. If you are on site and having an issue, as I say, we're happy to help. We do the kind of first and second line support here. If it's if it's like a deep network issue, we do have access to the guys in Canada at Lembrook as well, who are really good. But being in Canada, they're only available from 2 p.m., I think. So if you're going to go and have a difficult problem on an install, please do it sort of mid to late afternoon. And yeah, we can put you in touch with those guys and normally they can fix it. If you're not installing the network, but there is a network of any level of complexity there, please make sure that you know a little bit about what you're installing on. If there's a separate IT contractor involved, just get a spec from them. It will be fine in most cases, but if they've put any weird security rules on there or anything like that, or multiple VLANs, it's something you'll need to be aware of. By the way, if anyone's got any questions, if you put them on the chat, I'll try to get to them at the end. Yeah, probably best not to shout out. But yeah, stick them on the chat and I'll come to them at the end. All right, so the network, basically being as BluOS is a network-based streaming platform, the network underpins it. It's very important that the network works. So how do you make sure that that's the case? Number one, plug it in. You might say, well, it's wired or wireless in the case of Blue Sound. Why do you have to? Well, you don't. And yes, it will work absolutely fine on a wireless network. However, there are caveats to that. So if you've got say, 5 zones of BluOS in a big house, and the only connection to the LAN is a BT home hub, and that's it, then potentially, you could run into problems because there might be coverage issues in the house. There might be a lot of traffic going through that router at the same time. So we do say if you can plug it in because well, I did a sort of conference on best practice for Wi-Fi setup recently, and one of the main takeaways from that is that the best way to use Wi-Fi or to improve Wi-Fi performance is to use less Wi-Fi. So basically, the more devices that you've got managed by a network, by a wireless network, the more you're likely to run into problems. So if you can get a cable to something, great. And then for what you can't, then you rely on the Wi-Fi network. You're not going to get an Ethernet cable to a phone or a laptop, but a Blue Sound player potentially you can, a TV, an Xbox potentially you can. So where you can, plug it in. All right. So the flow of this kind of leaps around a bit all over the place. So sorry if it seems a bit all over the place. It's kind of this is a tip and this is a tip. And anyway, so the best practice for setup. Yes, if you're installing one zone into a hi-fi or a hi-fi type setup or a 2.1 or something like that, what you're probably going to do is you're just going to turn it on, wait for it to join the Wi-Fi, set it up on the app, and it'll be absolutely fine. However, if you're doing a lot of these installs or a lot of zones, the best practice, in our opinion, or I should say the opinion of the manufacturers, is actually to take one player at a time, assuming wireless, one player at a time, actually plug that player into the router or into an unmanaged switch and wait for it to get a connection. When the light goes blue, it's got a connection. At that point, discover what the IP address is for that device, which you can get from the admin console of the router, or you can get from, I use a little network scanner on my phone, and as long as there's not hundreds of devices on that network, then it's pretty easy to find the Blue Sound one. They're normally called Power Node or whatever it is. So once you found the IP address, you pop that into a browser and you will get this control panel. It's kind of like a backdoor to the app, if you like. First thing you do, check for upgrade. So if you're likely to get any issues during an install, it's normally because if an install doesn't work the first time, i.e., getting a player onto the network, it's normally because the upgrades failed because they're a bit picky about if an upgrade's being done, if it drops the network connection. So this is always, it's better to do it wired if you can. So you do the upgrade and then you configure the Wi-Fi by manually putting in the SSID and the password, and then you set the name of the zone on here. Now, I've put in red, very important, a distinct name from any other IP device in the home. The reason for this is quite often people will call a zone living room or bedroom, which is fine if it's the only device in the entire network that's called that thing. But quite often people have got an Apple TV called living room, or they've got a Philips Hue bulb called living room or something. And what you tend to find is if there are devices with the same name on the network, you can get conflicts, things like AirPlay, you can't tell which one is which, for example. And yeah, it can lead to problems. So basically, best thing to do, just go for something like living room audio, living room music, living room blue sound, whatever it is, rather than just living room. Okay, so you've done the upgrade, you've set the player name, you've set up the Wi-Fi. So then unplug it from the switch or the router, reboot it, and it should connect to the network and get blue light again. At that point, play some music and see if it works. Assuming yes, then take the player to the place that it's going to be in the house and test it again. Also, check the Wi-Fi signal, which you can check in the BluOS app under settings and diagnostics. It gives you a sort of a beamed strength of Wi-Fi. It should be good or excellent to guarantee that you're going to get decent service out of it. If it's fair or poor, you may need to look at the Wi-Fi network, improving the coverage in that area, or possibly moving it. It'll still work. It's just you may be subject to dropouts because the Wi-Fi isn't strong enough there. Um, then from there, if you go to the BluOS app on your phone, you finish off the setup there. So setting the what inputs you've got, what presets you want, if anything's auto sensing, what the homepage looks like, all that kind of good stuff. Um, and if you follow that process, if you've got four players, you do that. This whole process, one to five, once, and then you go on to the next one. It's very unlikely you're going to have problems. So, what issues do you get? Mainly, the issues that we encounter in support here are related to the network. So, as I've mentioned, weak Wi-Fi, dropout caused by overlapping access points, too much traffic on one particular channel, the broadband isn't fast enough. For example, if you're getting 20 meg or something like that, and there's multiple people in the house using it, obviously that's going to be a problem. Some very old routers don't have multicast enabled, and BlueSound uses the multicast protocol. So, yeah, if you've got like a sort of it'd be pretty rare these days, like 12-year-old router or something, that may need looking at. Firewalls blocking ports, pretty common in a more sort of enterprise type setup. Two routers. If you're using two routers, one needs to be in bridge mode, otherwise they can conflict. Repeaters are not recommended for use of BlueSound. Yeah, and if you're using managed switches, there can be conflicts there as well. So we recommend, if you can, use unmanaged switches. All right, so how do you fix these problems? There are various iPhone and Android apps available for free, which will analyze the traffic on the different bands. So it's good to pick. BlueSound is dual band. It's 2.4 or 5 gigahertz, but it favors 2.4. So if you can, when you're looking at what traffic is currently on the network, you can pick a band with less traffic on it. That is probably going to give you a better result. It's worth pointing out that when a router picks a band for a device to go on, it only generally does it when the router when that device either joins the network or when the router starts up in the first place. So basically, if this is set up a couple of months down the line, if devices have been added and removed, it may not be in the best configuration. So it's worth looking at. Power line adapters. So it's a bit of a contentious point. So Lembrook or BlueSound, I should say, do recommend power line adapters for use with their products. So if anyone doesn't know what a power line adapter is, I think you probably all do. It basically it's a plug that goes in a socket in one part of the house, which the you can plug an Ethernet cable into that, and at the other end, you've got a plug that basically goes into your router. So it allows you to use your home power network as effectively like an extension cable on for Ethernet. So yeah, it's an option. I mean, my own personal findings, I found in my old house, the power circuits in the house, it's a very old house. It introduced noise. So I couldn't use it for my Blue Sound node that I wanted to use it for. That won't be the case in a lot of houses, in particular more modern houses. But actually, even if you don't use power line adapters for your audio equipment, for a home network, if you're using power line adapters for other things, then that will take traffic off the network, which will overall improve the performance of the Wi-Fi. So, could your TV or the Apple TV or the Xbox be running off a power line adapter, for example? Quite possibly. And they don't all need their own power line adapter. You could plug one in at the B end and then have just a little cheap, 8-port switch that'll, you could power most of your living room off that in terms of connectivity. And yeah, whether or not it'll work for your audio devices, you kind of have to test it, I think, in the house. Um, Another issue you can find is, well, you can see in this diagram on the right, we've got a house, we've got the a sort of a sketch of the signal from two access points. Oops, skipped a slide, and it's overlapping. Now, obviously, you do want that. You don't want, otherwise you're going to get areas of no coverage. However, if you've got a device which is right in the middle of the two, so it's about 50-50 in terms of which one has the strongest signal for that position, then it's possible that a Blue Sound device in this situation could switch between one and the other of the access points. And BluOS doesn't like that. Basically, it can do things like lose connection to network drives and things like that if you're switching between two access points. So if it's right on the edge of the signal of one, but more to the sort of the center of the other, it should favor the stronger one. But if it's about 50-50, you should be able to, on most Wi-Fi setups, you can on these Ubiquiti ones anyway, I believe, just lock the player to a default access point to basically stop that from happening and just make sure that it keeps a constant connection. Um, if you're not a network person, this page may look a bit scary. It doesn't need to be. It's basically all the ports that need to be open for BluOS to work correctly. Now, you may not need to know this because, as standard, these will be open on most home broadband setups. However, if you find that, for example, you go into a house, you're not doing the Wi-Fi install, and your controller can't find any of the players, the chances are it may be that something's being blocked, and you'd need to go into the admin console. As I say, you could sort of take a picture of this if you want, or I'll share the presentation. But go into the admin console and just make sure those ports are open. Multicast and IGMP snooping need to be on. Quas needs to be off. You need to be on one VLAN. For larger installs and where there's a control system involved, we recommend DHCP reservation. Just make sure that if you lose connection to the controller, like if there's a power cut or something, that when it comes back up, it will be able to find everything again without any issue. Or you can manually set static IPs. Lembrook recommend DHCP reservation. To be honest, I'm not sure. It seems to be two schools of thought on which one is better, DHCP reservation or just setting static IPs. I think DHCP reservation is a bit easier because you can do it all on one page on the router admin page, whereas static IPs need to be done. Well, I'll show you how to do that in a sec. And yeah, just to reiterate, make sure your zone names are unique. Some useful IP commands. So if you want to set a static IP for one zone, all you need to do is put in the IP address of that player into a browser /static IP. That will pop up this page, and then that allows you to put in whatever IP address you want, and then hit update. Off you go. If you want to reboot a player, you can't get to the wire at the back, or for whatever reason you want to do that remotely, you can do that with the same IP address /reboot. Factory reset. Sometimes it's worth factory resetting players if we found it can clear some software bugs and things like that. If something isn't behaving, it's normally worth factory resetting and then retrying it. Most people know the process. You basically take the cable out, put the power back in, and then as you put the power back in, keep your finger on the button for 30 seconds until the light starts flashing red. And then you take your finger off and it goes through the sort of setup process again. You can do that via an IP command. We say probably don't do this with a Vault because it wipes. The Vault is the hard drive and CD ripper Bluesound product. It'll wipe the hard drive if you use the IP command. Normally, factory reset a Vault doesn't wipe it, but the IP command does for some reason. So just be wary of that because that could be a lot of lost music if you weren't. Some people like to disable automatic updates for their install customers, just to make sure they have a bit of a smoother experience and don't find that I've got to do another update every time they want to use it, whatever. So you can do that. It'll just be on whatever the current stable build of the software is. So yeah, hopefully some useful stuff there. What do the colors mean on Bluesound? So green is ready to be set up. Flashing green is trying to connect to the network, so in hotspot mode. If the light goes purple, you then need to reboot that device because it's been in setup mode for I think it's about 10, 15 minutes and it's timed out. So yeah, take the cable out, put it back in again, and then do the setup from there. Solid blue means it's connected to the network. Solid white means it's indexing. That's if you're a user of a library of music from a NAS drive, as I do myself. If you update all your files and then you need to re-index it, it'll go white. Solid red or flashing red and green is player updating. Flashing red, which you hopefully won't see, means there's something up. um, so yeah. All right, a few features of BluOS as a custom install product. So you can set the audio to mono. There's nothing that's really pushing the envelope there, but it's quite often useful when you're using ceiling speakers, particularly in rooms that are not a sort of perfectly kind of rectangular shape. You often find that overall audio spread is better throughout the room with mono. So yeah, that can be set. Minimum and maximum volume limits is quite a good one. Quite often people use powerful amps that will go much louder than a client is likely to want. I mean, this example here is don't blast the neighbors outdoors. So outdoors is one area that you might want to use it, but could be in any room of the house. Sometimes my 5-year-old could put some music on and accidentally, chip the volume all the way to the top. And, that wouldn't be great. So you could give them a bit more of a realistic volume curve, if you like, by setting that up prior to them getting their hands on it. Use the Blue Sound Hub. I've got a slide on that, so I'll come back to the hub in a second. But basically, the hub will allow you to share different sources around the home, which would be quite useful. It could be a TV, it could be an analog source like I don't know, like a tape deck or an FM radio or something like that. Could be a turntable, but I'll show you what that looks like. We don't use any funky connectors or adapters. Everything's standard, so you can use pretty much whatever cables you want with BluOS products. We have infrared and IP control features for all products. So if you don't want to use a phone, if you don't want to use an app, you can use a rhythm switch, you can use a Lutron keypad, you can use a remote, you can use a TV remote in the case of like a sort of 2.1 AV system. You don't actually need to technically touch the BluOS app as a user. The Vault, which I mentioned, is usable as a standard Windows SMB protocol NAS drive. So if you've got a bunch of music on there, you could share it with anything else on your network. We've had instances of people having Blue Sound and Sonos in the same house, for example. I came across the other day, which is a bit weird, but it can be done. The API for BluOS is open. So if you're a software developer, you have access to that to basically do whatever you want with it. We quite often get calls from people who are using some kind of platform that I've never heard of, saying, "Oh, have you got? Can we get access to your API?" And yeah, you can. If you can program it, you can use whatever you want. In terms of pre-built drivers, there are stacks. They're mainly really good. I mean, I will say the Crestron Control 4 Elan and RTI drivers are really well developed. They do everything you'd expect reliably. Savant isn't there, unfortunately, but we're kind of come across that one a bit less. So yeah, just going back to the hub. So it's a little black box about the size of an Apple TV, and basically this is an accessory. It's not a player as such. All it is a means of plugging lots of things in, and then sharing those sources over the network. So this is a common example here. It's got a moving magnet preamp in it, and actually quite a decent one, which means that you can pop a turntable and a few records in a nice little bohemian looking corner, some cushions or whatever in the window, plug it into the hub, hide the hub away, but then that turntable source is available on all your players in every room. So you don't need, wires going kind of back into the players. We've had installers that have used them as a means of getting some TV audio down the other end of a pub we had recently. So if I'm in a long room, I need to get some audio at the far end, and the TV's at the other end. You pop the hub on the wall behind the TV. It comes with a mount in the box, a pulse speaker down the other end. The latency, I'm not sure what the latency is, but it's fine. It's unnoticeable. And yeah, you've got wireless, audio down the other end of the room without having to get a cable down there. So yeah, it's a neat little kind of get out of jail product. Remote control. So it's a basic thing. We're all familiar with them. Some people like them, some people don't. The Blue Sound one doesn't come bundled with anything. It's retails at £49. It's quite a nice remote. It's got a nice bit of weight to it. It doesn't feel cheap. But popular with some people, popular with older users who perhaps want to use a phone less than younger people. But it's infrared. You can point it at a player. It does volume, transport controls, and presets, which are really nice. I'll come on to presets in a second. But yeah, if you want to play your favorite radio station or something, just come in, hit the button, and it's a bit easier than getting your phone out and fanning around, putting something on. Oh, by the way, if you don't want to use the RC one, you can program any infrared remote. There's IR learning via BluOS, so you can use the TV remote as well, should you wish to do that. Um, okay, presets. I don't know if everyone knows about these or not. They're a really good BluOS feature. Somewhat different from a playlist, for example, in that a preset can be a playlist, but it can also be a radio station. It can also be an input if there's an input you use regularly, and you can set the volume on them. So it's really easy to set up a preset. You can do it from the now playing page in BlueOS. There's three little dots. You hit the three dots and it says add preset, and you just pick add preset, and it'll allow you to maintain the volume if you want, allow you to rename it. Um, and it's quite cool because it just means it gives you, if you've got a remote or if you've got a rhythm keypad, or even if it's just your phone, it's quicker than going in. Say I listen to Radio 6 music in the kitchen, rather than getting my phone out every time I go to cook and going, oh, tune in 6 music. It takes about 15 seconds. I just go up to my little pulse speaker and I hit the button, hit number one on that. It plays 6 music at the right volume, and you've saved 10 seconds. Right, it's only 10 seconds. It's 10 seconds every day. Um, what some installers have done is for the primary user in a room, they've mirrored the presets that that user has in their car for their radio station. So a lot of people have like 3, 4, 5 radio stations that they listen to. It's quite nice to reflect that in their bedroom or whatever. And then it's easy for them to remember. And yeah, how they access those presets, it's kind of up to the installer. A lot of people use different kinds of keypads, whether it's Control 4 or a remote or whatever. Um, I've just given a quick guide here on how to do a Spotify playlist as a preset, because Spotify isn't native within BlueOS. It's available via Spotify Connect. So how do you set up a preset? So you go to the Spotify app, you start playing something, you hit the little connect button, and then you pick the player or players that you want that you want the preset on. So in my case, living room group here. Then you come out of Spotify app, you go to the BlueOS app, and you go to the now playing screen. On the now playing screen, you hit the 3 little dots here, and you'll see the add preset icon. Then once you've added it, if you then want to if you want to fix the volume or edit the title of it, you do that via the presets menu in BlueOS. All right, just a couple of, I think Control 4 is probably the most popular control system which BlueOS is integrated into. So just done a couple of quick points on Control 4 integration. The driver's really good. Lenbrook have their own Control 4 programmer in-house that's, I hear, very good. And, we've had features added within days. So if you do have any feature suggestions or something's not working the way you would like, then let us know, because we can get things changed. It does all of what you'd expect it to. It also allows browsing, which I know some integrations via Control 4, some audio integrations don't. So you can search Tidal, Amazon Music, whatever it is. You can send favorites to rooms, you can group zones. It all works well. With that said, to set up, sometimes people, the first time they do a Control 4 integration, they're like, oh, this doesn't work like, one that I've done before. There's a couple of things that you need to know. So first of all, you need to download the latest BlueOS Control 4 driver from bluesound.com. Don't get it via Control 4, because Control 4 drivers aren't always up to date, and that can lead to problems. And also, if prior to installing the driver, if you add the players first, then apparently that can then cause Control 4 to go and get its own, to go and get the driver for you, but it gets some crappy old version of it rather than the latest version. So download it from bluesound.com, then install that media service into the project, then add the players one at a time. Then you have to make sure that the room names you enter into the driver match exactly the room names in BluOS. So if you've called it living room audio, it's got to be called living room audio. Otherwise, the players won't be seen by Control 4 or by the driver, I should say. When you're using a control system, we recommend fixed IPs or DHCP reservation, which I've talked about already. If you're looking for the auto power rooms and the network status, the network status, they're in the properties tab on Composer. So down here it shows network statuses online. Now we've had people do an install within Control 4 and then say, oh, hold on, it says network status offline down here. That is common because basically the way that our driver works, it will only show us online when a command is actually being received. So it will just be sort of briefly online and then offline again. When the ports are closed, the driver doesn't see the player as being online, and that's fine. That's normal. It's nothing to worry about. If you want to double check the network status, you can do that via the Lua output, where it needs to show this GNet connected is true.